College freshman Ethan arrived at Greenfield University excited to start a new chapter of his life. He was assigned to an older dormitory on campus, a 4-story red brick building with creaky floors and narrow hallways. Ethan's room was small and plain, just 2 beds and 2 desks. He and his roommate settled in quickly, hanging posters and string lights to make the space cozy. At first, everything about dorm life felt normal, but as the semester wore on, strange events began to trouble room 319. It started with little things. Late one night, Ethan's roommate was already asleep when Ethan heard a scratching sound coming from the wall behind his bed. It was a slow, faint scratch, as if something sharp was dragging along inside the wall. He assumed it might be mice in the old building. He banged on the plaster and the noise stopped. A week later, their closet door was found wide open in the morning, even though both students swore they had shut it before going to bed. Small items, pens, a textbook, would disappear from the desk and turn up on the floor or under the beds. Ethan's roommate laughed it off, joking that the dorm was haunted by a playful ghost. Ethan tried to laugh too, but he couldn't ignore the growing feeling that they were not alone. As midterm season arrived, Ethan's roommate went home for a long weekend, leaving Ethan alone in the dorm. That Friday night, the building was unusually quiet. Most students had left campus or were out partying. Ethan settled into bed early, hoping to catch up on sleep. Outside, rain drummed against the windows. Sometime around 2 a.m., Ethan was jolted awake by the sound of heavy footsteps in the hallway. They were odd, shuffling steps, as if someone was dragging their feet. Who would be pacing the hall at this hour, he wondered. The footsteps stopped right outside his door. In the dark, Ethan held his breath, expecting maybe a drunk student to knock or pass by. Instead, there was a loud bang on his door, then another and another. It was a furious pounding, as if someone wanted to break in. Ethan jumped out of bed, heart hammering. "Hello? Who's there?" he called, voice shaking. No answer, just relentless banging that echoed in the empty hall. Summoning courage, Ethan crept toward the door and peered through the peephole. He could see nothing but the dimly lit corridor. No person was visible. The banging stopped, replaced by a chilling silence. Ethan's skin prickled. This is not normal, he thought. Suddenly, through the silence, he heard a new sound that sent ice through his veins, a low, raspy whisper from the other side of the door, calling his name. "Ethan," the voice crooned, drawn out and unnatural. Ethan's throat tightened. It sounded like a woman's voice, but warped with static, as though coming through a broken radio. "Ethan, let me in." He stumbled backward, away from the door. His mind raced. Perhaps this was a prank, but how would anyone know he was here alone tonight? And that voice, it didn't sound like any student he knew. As he stood paralyzed in the middle of his dark room, something moved in his peripheral vision. He snapped his head toward the mirror above his dresser. In the reflection, he thought he saw a shadowy figure standing behind him, tall and blacker than the darkness itself. He spun around in terror, but nothing was there. When he looked back at the mirror, the figure was gone. At that moment, the overhead light flickered and then popped, plunging the room into gloom with only the glow of the cloudy moonlight through the window. The air turned stagnant and cold. Ethan could feel someone, something watching him. The corner of the room by the closet seemed darker than before, as if the shadows were gathering. Ethan's breath came rapid and shallow. He pressed himself against the wall, eyes darting everywhere. In the silence, he could faintly hear that crackling whisper inside the room now, a garbled muttering of his name and other words he couldn't make out. The closet door, which he knew he had closed, was now ajar, a black gap yawning open. Ethan reached shakily for the desk lamp and clicked it on. The small lamp cast a feeble yellow circle of light. He wished he had someone there with him. Desperate, he grabbed his phone to call campus security or anyone at all, but the phone wouldn't turn on. The battery, which had been nearly full earlier, was now completely drained. As he tried in vain to power it up, a soft thud came from the closet. Ethan froze. Another thud, like something falling to the floor inside the closet. With trembling legs, Ethan approached the closet door. Each step felt heavy. He could only see darkness through the opening. Gathering every ounce of courage, he yanked the door fully open and shone his lamp inside. Nothing. Just his clothes hanging, swaying slightly as if they'd been disturbed. The thuds stopped. For a moment, Ethan let out a shaky sigh of relief, thinking whatever had happened might be over. But as he watched, two pale eyes suddenly blinked into existence from the back corner of the closet, staring at him from a height near the ceiling. There was no face, no body visible, just two luminous eyes in the dark. They were fixed directly at Ethan. Ethan's scream caught in his throat. He stumbled backward, dropping the lamp. The bulb shattered, and again he was in near total darkness. The closet door slammed shut on its own, with a force that shook the walls. In the pitch black, Ethan fumbled for the dorm room door, panicking to get out, but the door that led to the hallway wouldn't budge, as if an unseen force held it shut. Ethan pounded and yanked at the handle, screaming for help, but his voice felt swallowed by the silence of the empty dorm. Behind him, he heard the creak of the closet door slowly reopening. Ethan refused to turn around. He could feel an icy presence looming closer and closer. A wave of sheer despair washed over him, a sensation so overwhelming that his rational mind started to crack. The whispering voice rose again, directly in his ear now, though he was alone in the room. "Ethan, I'm here," it sighed. He felt a cold breath on his neck. That was the last straw. Ethan's mind couldn't take any more. His screams turned to hysterical shrieks as he banged on the door, desperate to escape the nightmare closing in on him. Eventually, other students in the building heard the commotion. By the time a resident advisor unlocked the door, they found Ethan collapsed on the floor. He was curled into a corner, sobbing and laughing at the same time, covering his ears and mumbling incoherently about eyes in the dark and a voice that won't leave him alone. Campus security was called, and Ethan was taken out on a stretcher, still screaming at something unseen. He never returned to classes after that night. According to whispers around campus, Ethan's parents withdrew him from school and had him hospitalized for a mental breakdown. To this day, he remains under psychiatric care, unable or perhaps unwilling to recount exactly what he experienced in room 319. Other students who've lived on the same dorm floor reported only mild odd occurrences, lights flickering or the occasional unexplained knock, nothing as extreme as what drove Ethan into madness. Was it a malicious spirit targeting him specifically, or did the isolation and stress prey on his mind? We might never know. The university officially chalked up the incident to a student's psychological episode, but those who were there that night, who heard Ethan's blood-curdling screams, feel certain that something evil dwells in that old dormitory. Room 319 has since acquired a reputation. Nobody wants that room anymore, and if someone does end up there, they never dare spend a night alone. That was the first story. If you found Ethan's experience chilling, let me know how you would have handled it. Would you dare stay another night in that room? Feel free to share your thoughts or any scary dorm experiences of your own in the comments.
In the north of England stands Blackwood University, an institution with a history stretching back over a century. Its campus is a mix of modern libraries and old Gothic-style halls. The East Hall Dormitory was one of the oldest buildings, a stone structure with ivy-covered walls and narrow leaded windows. By the late 1990s, East Hall was showing its age. Rumors swirled among students that the building was haunted, though most treated it as just campus lore. One autumn, two close friends, let's call them Mark and Nina, were assigned to live in East Hall. They laughed off the ghost stories, excited to be placed in the charming antique dorm. Little did they know, they would soon witness a nightmare that would shut down East Hall for good. From the day Mark and Nina moved in, they noticed the dorm had an odd atmosphere. The hallways were drafty, even when windows were closed, and at night, the old pipes would clang and hiss. Their room was on the 3rd floor, and directly above them, on the sealed-off 4th floor, was said to be an abandoned attic level that had been closed for decades. Sometimes, late at night, they thought they heard faint noises from above, a scraping sound or footsteps, even though nobody was supposed to be up there. The resident advisor insisted the noises were just due to old plumbing and the building settling. Mark joked that perhaps a ghost was pacing the empty attic. Nina, ever the skeptic, teased him that he watched too many horror movies. One autumn October night, a group of students gathered in Mark and Nina's room to hang out. The conversation turned to the campus ghost stories. An older student mentioned a legend. Back in the 1940s, East Hall had housed nursing students, and one young woman allegedly died by violent means in the 4th floor attic. Some say it was murder. Others claim it was a suicide spurred by madness, but no records could be found. According to the tale, her restless spirit still wandered the sealed attic. Most of the group laughed, but Mark noticed as the story was told, the lights in the room suddenly dimmed. A few of his friends looked uneasy. To lighten the mood, someone suggested they explore the off-limits 4th floor to prove it was just an empty space with nothing to fear. Fueled by bravado and a couple of beers, Mark, Nina, and 2 other friends decided to sneak up the old stairwell that led to the attic level. They pried off a no-entry sign and managed to open the heavy, unused wooden door at the top of the stairs. Stale air greeted them, and they coughed at the dust. Their flashlights cut through the darkness to reveal a long corridor with a low ceiling. Old furniture draped in sheets lined the walls, forgotten desks, bed frames, and wardrobes from decades past. The air was thick and cold. Despite their earlier bravado, the friends fell quiet as they ventured down the corridor. Each of them felt an inexplicable dread creeping in. About halfway down the hall, Nina pointed out something strange. One of the doors at the end had light seeping from under it, a faint yellow glow. "Maybe a caretaker left a light on?" whispered one friend. Mark's heart was pounding, but he led the way. "Hello?" he called softly. No answer. As they neared the door, the light suddenly flickered off. They exchanged nervous glances. Mark reached for the doorknob, hand trembling, and gently pushed it open. The room beyond was small, an old storage room. The single naked light bulb hanging from the ceiling had indeed been on. It swayed slightly, as if someone had just brushed past it. What made them all freeze in terror was the figure standing in the corner of the room. It was the silhouette of a young woman in a long dress, her back turned to them. They could see her long dark hair cascading down her back. At first, in the dim light, they thought it must be someone playing a prank, perhaps an upperclassman who got wind of their plan. Nina mustered a nervous laugh. "Very funny, you nearly scared us," she said. The figure did not move or respond. Mark stepped forward cautiously, shining his flashlight. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked. The beam illuminated the woman's figure, and they realized with a jolt that her feet were not touching the floor. She was hovering an inch above the dusty floor. Nina gasped and stumbled backward into their friends. The woman began to turn her head towards them. As her profile became visible in the flashlight beam, they saw her pallid skin and eyes that were nothing but dark, sunken pits. There was a deep red gash on the side of her neck. Mark felt an icy wave of fear crash over him. He fumbled a step back, and in that instant, the door slammed shut on its own, separating Mark, who had stepped into the room, from the others still in the hallway. Mark yelped and yanked at the door, but it wouldn't open. His friends on the other side pounded and shouted his name, their voices panicked. Inside the storage room, Mark pressed his back against the door, flashlight shaking in his hand. The figure, or thing, in the corner twitched and then moved. But she didn't walk. She glided silently towards Mark. In the hall, Nina and the others heard Mark's muffled scream. Desperate, they threw their weight against the door repeatedly. It burst open at last, spilling them into the room. To their horror, Mark was lying on the floor unconscious, and that woman was kneeling over him. Actually, she was floating just above him, one hand hovering over his chest. Her head snapped up to glare at the newcomers, and she let out an ear-piercing shriek that didn't sound human. The light bulb exploded in a shower of glass, plunging everything into darkness. The friends grabbed Mark by the arms and dragged him out of the room, running blindly down the hall, guided only by the faint beam of a dropped flashlight and sheer adrenaline. As they retreated, they heard a heavy crash behind them and the sound of the door slamming again. One friend swore he felt something ice-cold grasp at his shoulder as they fled. They didn't stop running until they reached the second floor, where other dorm residents were gathered, alarmed by the commotion and the distant scream. Mark was coming to, shaking violently and gasping for air like he'd been drowning. His friends frantically recounted what happened to the resident advisor and a small crowd of students. Campus security and paramedics were called. Mark had nasty red marks on his chest and neck that looked like finger marks, as if a hand had pressed down on him with tremendous force. He was in shock, barely coherent. The police and university officials questioned the group. At first, it was hard for anyone to believe the wild tale about a ghostly woman attacking a student. Some suspected an intruder, or that the students had imagined things under the influence. But when the officers went upstairs to inspect that attic storage room, they found it in disarray. An old wardrobe inside had toppled over, likely the crash they heard, and the dust on the floor was disturbed, as if someone without feet had been dragging along it. Strangest of all, they found wet footprints leading to the small window, footprints of a woman's bare feet, inexplicably starting in the center of the room and ending at the window ledge. The prints were fresh and damp, though there had been no rain leaking in. Everyone was baffled. The university immediately sealed off the entire fourth floor and the stairwell leading up to it. Mark was taken to the hospital. Sadly, he never recovered fully from that night. He suffered from acute pneumonia in the aftermath, perhaps from shock or some unexplained cause, and passed away a week later due to complications. Officially, his death was recorded as an illness, but those who knew the story felt there was something sinister responsible. Mark's grieving friends insisted that something not of this world harmed him in that room, but their claims were met with skepticism by the administration. East Hall gained national attention after these events. The university, facing pressure, closed East Hall entirely and relocated the remaining students. The old dormitory now stands abandoned, boarded up and off-limits behind a chain-link fence. No one knows exactly what happened the night Mark and his friends went into the attic. The truth remains a chilling mystery. Some say the spirit of that long-dead young woman finally had her revenge or found a new victim. Others think the group's collective fear fed a dangerous energy in that decrepit space. To this day, locals whisper that if you walk by East Hall at night, you might catch a glimpse of a pale girl in the fourth-floor window or hear a faint knock from behind the brick walls, as if the building itself remembers. Whatever the cause, East Hall's dark secret has never been fully explained, and perhaps it's better left that way.
Maya was in her second year at a small university in eastern Canada. She lived in an on-campus residence called Maplewood Hall, a fairly modern dormitory with 4 floors. It wasn't old or spooky. In fact, it was bright and busy, with students always around. Maya shared a suite with one roommate, and their unit had its own little bathroom and 2 bedrooms off a common area. It felt safe. But in the winter of that year, Maya experienced a series of events in Maplewood Hall that would terrify any student living away from home. The scariest part? The danger was not supernatural at all, but very real, proving that sometimes reality is more frightening than any ghost story. Maya and her roommate, Jenna, started noticing that small personal items would go missing from their rooms. Jenna complained that some of her snacks from their shared mini-fridge were disappearing even when Maya hadn't touched them. Maya joked that Jenna must be sleep-eating, while Jenna teased Maya about having gremlins stealing things. They changed the locks on their fridge and even stuck a little note on it saying, "If you're stealing our food, at least say hi," assuming it was just some mischievous dorm mates. Yet the odd occurrences escalated. Maya would return from class to find her closet door open when she knew she had closed it. Jenna once found her laundry, which she had left folded on her bed, rearranged in a strange way, almost as if someone had riffled through it. The girls began to feel uneasy. They asked the other two girls in the adjacent suite if they'd noticed anything weird, but those neighbors said no. As a precaution, Maya and Jenna took to locking their bedroom doors whenever they left, not just the front door of the suite. Despite that, the unsettling incidents continued. Maya woke up one night around 1 a.m. to a faint rustling sound. She lay in bed, eyes adjusting to the darkness, listening hard. It sounded like it was coming from the common area just outside her bedroom. She wondered if Jenna was up late, but she could hear Jenna's soft snores in the next room. Maya's heart began to race. "Is someone in our living room?" she thought. She quietly slid out of bed and tiptoed to her door. The rustling stopped. For a long minute, Maya stood there, holding her breath and straining to hear anything through the door. Nothing. Finally, convincing herself it might have been the heater or the building settling, she crept back to bed. A couple of days later, both roommates noticed something that truly unnerved them. The ceiling hatch in their closet, which led to a small attic crawl space for maintenance, appeared slightly ajar. Neither of them had ever touched that hatch. It was directly above the top shelf in the closet, about 8 feet off the ground. To open it, someone would need to stand on a chair or ladder. They peered up into it with a flashlight, but saw only darkness and insulation. Fearing squirrels or a raccoon might have gotten in somehow, they reported it to the door maintenance team. A handyman came the next day, checked the crawl space quickly, and shrugged it off, saying there were no signs of animals and maybe the latch was just loose. He secured it and left. Maya and Jenna tried to brush off their creeping feeling of being watched. For a while, things were calm. Then, one frigid January night, Maya returned from a late study session at the library around midnight. Jenna was out of town for a family event, so Maya was alone in the suite. She unlocked the front door and stepped in to find the lights off, just as she had left them. As she trudged into her bedroom, exhausted, she had the odd sense that something was off. She couldn't place it at first. Nothing obvious. The furniture was where it should be, her window was closed, everything looked normal. Shrugging it off, Maya got ready for bed, double-checked that the front door was locked, and turned in for the night. Sometime around 3 a.m., Maya snapped awake with a jolt of panic. She wasn't sure why. She had been deep in a dream, now suddenly alert. The room was dark, but she immediately sensed another presence. Her skin prickled with the unmistakable feeling of being watched. For a few seconds, she lay very still, ears tuning in to the darkness. There, a subtle sound just beyond her slightly open bedroom door, a floorboard creaking. Maya's heart leapt into her throat. Someone is in the common area, she realized. Had Jenna come back early? But Jenna would have woken her, and Jenna wasn't due until the next day. The creeping fear that it was an intruder paralyzed Maya. Summoning courage, Maya reached silently under her pillow where she kept her phone. She picked it up and saw with dread that the battery was nearly dead. It must not have charged properly. She cursed her breath. Just then, the hinges of her bedroom door emitted a slight squeak. The door, which she had left only a few inches ajar, was slowly pushing open. In the darkness, she could make out the silhouette of a figure standing in the doorway, tall and unmoving. She could tell it was a person, the outline of shoulders, a head, but no features in the dark. Terror flooded her body. She wanted to scream, but fear clamped her throat shut. The figure took a quiet step into her room. Enough moonlight filtered through the curtains that she saw a glint of something in his hand. It looked like a knife. A cold wave of realization hit her. This wasn't a prank or a roommate. A stranger was inside her dorm, in her bedroom, and he had a weapon. As the intruder crept closer, probably thinking she was still asleep, Maya knew she had seconds to act. Adrenaline overpowering her fear, she suddenly sprang upright on the bed and let out the loudest scream her lungs could manage, a scream of pure fear that echoed down the halls. The figure lunged forward, and in the faint light she saw a flash of a pale face, wide eyes. The man, it was definitely a man, grabbed at her, trying to muffle her screams with his gloved hand. Maya fought with every ounce of strength, kicking and thrashing. The intruder hissed, "Shut up," in a low, vicious tone. She felt the cold edge of the knife graze her arm as she struggled. A sharp pain shot through her, but the adrenaline dulled it. Her screams turned into shouts of "Help! Help me!" as she managed to twist free from his grasp for a moment. Outside in the hallway, she heard voices stirring. Someone had heard her. Enraged and panicking, the man shoved her to the floor and bolted out of the room. Maya scrambled up and dashed after him into the common area, in time to see the front door of the suite slam open. 2 male students from down the hall were already there in the corridor, drawn by her screams. "He went that way," Maya sobbed, pointing as the dark figure sprinted down the hallway toward the back exit stairs. The 2 students gave chase, while another neighbor gently guided the shaking Maya out of her suite, telling her it was okay. Help was coming. Within minutes, campus security and police were on site. They searched the building thoroughly. The back door of the dorm had been propped open with a small piece of brick, likely how the intruder slipped in. It became clear that this man had been hiding in Maplewood Hall for some time. In fact, when the police inspected the crawl space above the closet in Maya's suite, they found signs of habitation: food wrappers, a blanket, and a small stash of stolen items, including Jenna's missing snacks and some of the trinkets Maya thought she'd misplaced. The intruder had been secretly living above them, quietly coming down when the coast was clear, possibly even entering their rooms while they slept, and retreating to the attic space. It sent chills through Maya to imagine that the whole time they joked about a ghost or gremlins, a real man had been watching them from above. The police suspected he'd accessed the crawl space through an unsecured vent in the dorm's maintenance room. They tried to track him down, but after fleeing that night, the dorm creeper, as people started calling him, disappeared. He was never caught. In the weeks after, Maya struggled with sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she imagined those eyes in the dark, the door inching open, the feel of that cold blade. She moved to a new dorm in a different building, and Maplewood Hall added additional security measures and checks. Many students were terrified to learn how easily a stranger had been living among them unnoticed. In the end, Maya survived her ordeal physically. The cut on her arm was shallow and healed into a thin scar, but the psychological scars ran deeper. She double-checks locks compulsively now and cannot sleep without a light on. What disturbs her most is knowing that the man who violated the safety of her dorm was not a ghost or a demon, but an ordinary person with evil intentions. Sometimes, late at night, she finds herself thinking, where is he now? Does he still hide in dark attics above unsuspecting students? The questions haunt her, even as life goes on. Maya continues her studies, determined not to live in fear, but one thing is certain: she will never forget the night she came face to face with true terror in the dorm. Dorm life is supposed to be full of memories about friendship and fun, not nightmares. These 3 stories serve as a chilling reminder that when the lights go out and you find yourself alone in those communal halls, reality can be just as frightening as fiction. Whether it's unexplainable forces from beyond or a very real intruder with bad intentions, danger can lurk where you least expect it. So if you ever feel like you're not alone in your dorm room at night, trust your instincts, stay safe out there, and sleep tight if you can.